Welcome to the Stories of School Leadership podcast, the podcast where we elevate the voices of and create connections between inspirational leaders from the UK and around the world. I'm Emma Lurie, and thank you for joining me as I share these journeys, inspirations and stories of education, leadership and life. In this episode, I'm joined by the very wonderful Hannah Wilson. Hannah is a leadership development consultant. She is also a coach and trainer and the founder and director of Diverse Educators. I've been inspired by Hannah for a long time, and so it was really fantastic to speak to her. She shares candidly her experience of going into education and leadership, and she talks about the importance of creating space for others, elevating and lifting up the voices of others, and particularly women. She shares about those who have inspired her, those who haven't inspired her, taught her what not to do. And she talks really honestly about her own experience of being pushed out of the system, a really honest reflection. And I think lots of people will share insights into what Hannah has experienced. And she shares the sort of work that she's doing now, hugely influential, hugely fascinating. So I hope you love it as much as I did. Let's get going. Hi, Hannah. It's so fantastic to have you with me. I'm very privileged that you're willing to spend a little bit of time talking to me about your journey in education. So can you share with us who you are, where in the world you are, and what your current job, role, business is?
Sure, Emma, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm Hannah Wilson. I am a leadership development consultant, coach and trainer. That's the day job. I've been doing that for 5 years. I'm also the co-founder and the director of Diverse Educators. And I relocated to Bath last year from Oxford. Before that, I was in London. So I move around quite a lot.
Amazing. Well, Bath is a beautiful place to live.
It is.
Good choice. Right. I am super nosy, which is mainly why I like doing this podcast. But I really like finding out about people's own school experience, because there tends to be kind of links back sometimes into, their journey in education. So what was school like for you? How did you find it?
When I saw this question, I was like, you don't get asked that one very often at 45. I was always a good student. I was good at school. I was happy at school. And then I went to a school 11 to 16 that I was less happy with. It was quite traditional. And my favourite subject's always been English. And I kind of fell out of love with my subject because the teaching was so dry. But I got very involved in the extracurricular. So I had this kind of like this mixed bag. I also had some tricky friendship circles, like when you end up in a year group where there's just interesting dynamics. So I didn't massively enjoy secondary, but then I told my parents I was going to college and not staying on for sixth form. So I was 16, I could do what I wanted, and I absolutely loved college. And college is where I really came into my own, and I found my people. And I was actually talking to my sister about this week, because my niece has just started college this week. In Exeter, actually, it's down the road from you.
Great place.
We're talking about how hard, it's such a difficult transition, isn't it? When you go to a new space and you're meeting new friends, but actually they're my people. They're the people who I'm still really, really good friends with. And we were all perhaps the odd one out in our own schools, but we found each other and became a really tight unit.
Oh, and that bit's so important, isn't it? And I guess different people have different experiences throughout their education. Hopefully you have an element of that throughout, but yeah, a lot of people say maybe it took to university, or that kind of when you can really make those key choices about the subjects you're doing or the specialisms, because then you don't have all the other noise of the other stuff going on, all those competing priorities. You meet people who have those same fascinations or interests. You kind of maybe are more likely to find your tribe, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then what happened? How did you get into education? What made you think that was a great life choice?
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I can't think I was talking to you this week about career choices. Everyone always told me I'd be a teacher because I was an assertive young lady, in brackets, bossy. And my grandmother was a primary school teacher. My mum was, she's still alive, but she isn't anymore doing this job. She was a nursery nurse. So there's definitely that kind of that child care vein. I spent most of my weekends and holidays working in the nursery and earning some pocket money, whereas my sister went to work with dad and put up sheds and stuff and did construction. So we were quite different in how we did things. So I kind of almost resisted becoming a teacher because everyone thought I'd become a teacher. And I wanted to go into publishing. I wanted to be a writer, an editor. So I did a lit degree, and then I went and worked in publishing and got bored because I was in an office. Then I went to work at events and I got bored because I was in an office. So events, really, you're in an office for 6 months for a 2-day conference.
Oh,
So then
that
I got
surprises me because I always say to people, in another life I'd be a party or wedding planner.
it's a
Maybe
lot of planning, mate. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot about admin. It's a lot of tracking and meetings for a 1-day event or a 2-day event. So
all right, you've
neither of
changed my
those
life choices.
oh wow, neither of those two things were for me. And at that point, there was a massive recruitment campaign for English teachers. So I kind of fell in. I talk about falling into teaching. It was almost my plan B. I thought I'd qualify and go traveling and become a teacher when I was older, or I'd go and work abroad. And I fell into it and just found like my vocation. Really, I loved it. And bounced through the system for 20 years, like, and didn't really stop and question what was going on until I turned 40, and then had a big like moment of like, is this my life for the next 25 years? Am I where I'm supposed to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Is Headship my next chapter? And I resigned from Headship. So that's the kind of the short story.
It's the age thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The 40 thing, yeah. If a lot of people say that, they do, or I guess other age brackets are available to make your big life choices, but it does feel like that's the kind of bit where you're like, right, I've done a pocket of time, and usually a long time, you know, good enough time in your career, whatever choices they are. And then, yeah, a lot of people, I think, are kind of questioning their life choices.
Well, you do. And I think the big thing was because my mum turned 60 and I turned 40, both in March 2019. And I've spent a lot of time every weekend with friends and family. And I think I spent a lot of time with educators because when you're a teacher, lots of your friends are teachers. And I think we've got this problematic endorsement almost where we usualize the fact that we're all working silly hours and we're all stressed and we all burn ourselves out and then we go on a nice holiday, it's all okay. But as long as we're all doing it, it's okay. And I think for that month, I saw all my non-educated friends and family who held the mirror up and said, like, we're really proud of you, but you work all the time, you're really stressed, when are you going to stop? And I had the same conversation with people who love me, like for 4 weekends running. And I got to the point where I was like, actually, like, I need to listen to this. And I'm quite a, what's the word I'm looking for? A decisive person. And I just resigned. And there were ricochets at my employment because of that, because they didn't appreciate the immediacy of my decision making.
Yeah. I feel like you fast forwarded like a huge big chapter. Right, I need to go back. We need to go back. Tell me more about the leadership bit. So I guess you started teaching and then and you've already, you know, used the phrase bossy, which absolutely, I was the child who was like playing teachers at home, you know, like raising strong women. I have 2 of my own. What was the bit in your teaching career, I guess, that then set you into leadership? Like, how did that little bit happen?
I became a leader in my second year teaching. Yeah. Like, I've always worked in quite challenging schools where you basically like sink or swim. And you've met me, I'm 6'1", I'm confident. It was kind of like, if you could hold your own, you got promoted and they wanted to keep you. So I got offered a promotion at the end of my first year to stay in the school, but I decided to relocate and move to London at that point. So I basically picked up responsibility quite quickly, and I had curriculum responsibility and pastoral. So I then ended up working for an academy chain where it was a vertical structure. We did both. I worry that in some schools you either become a curriculum specialist or a pastoral specialist, and you get to SLT and you've been siloed. So I don't think I appreciated at the time that we were being developed in a really holistic way, in a really well-rounded way. And I say often, I pretty much did every job in the school apart from timetabling. I would have loved to do timetabling because I love problem solving. So I picked up things quite quickly. And then I've worked in 6 schools over the 20 years I spent in schools. And I just naturally kept being pushed up the ladder. I wasn't necessarily looking for leadership, but I also don't put up with poor leadership. So I kind of got to the point where rather than bitching and whinging about the person above me, I'm just going to put my hat in and try and do the job, and I can't do as bad a job as they're doing, kind of thing. So that was one of the things that almost pulled me up. And I've worked in schools whereby if you're good at behaviour management, you got promoted. I've also worked in a lot of schools where it was quite male heavy, and I was my elbows out to make a bit of space for women and breaking through some of those ceilings, really. So yeah, it was interesting. Like, I love the leadership piece. I've always loved being a leader, but I've also loved like developing and nurturing and empowering other leaders as well. I've always done a lot of mentoring, a lot of coaching, a lot of training.
I love that idea of making some space, because that is so needed. And I can see already, you know, my experience of work, knowing you, that's something you're really fantastic at. So what was Headship like then? I feel like we kind of fast forward to the end point of it. Like, how long did you do it for? What was it like? Highs and lows?
Highs and lows. Okay. So it's interesting. If I go back to deputy headship for a minute, my deputy headship was really intense and really full on. I took deputy headship in our sister school. So I'd worked in one school for 6 years. I was assistant principal and I got deployed over and then I got the substantive role. And I was the only female on that SLT, and that school was inadequate and it needed rapidly improving. And I was the only female, but also the youngest. And it was quite a precarious role to be in. And I worked really, really hard, but it was a really stressful 3 years. And I can remember the head at the time saying to me, "When are you going to apply to be a head?" I said, "I'm not in a massive rush to be a head teacher." And he said, "Well, why are you working so hard then?" I was like, "What? So I only work hard because I want the next promotion and the next pay grade?" Like that was an interesting conversation in itself. I decided at this point, I must have been mid-30s, I wanted to leave London and move back to Bristol, Bath. And I applied for some deputy headships and I kept coming second to the internal candidate. And I can remember my executive head, who I'd worked for at the previous school, saying to me, "Wilson, for God's sake, what are you doing? Stop messing around. Stop applying for sideways moves. You need to be a head." It's like, "I don't want to be a head. I'm not made to be a head." He said, "But you're going to scare the living daylights of any head teachers going to try and manage you. Just go and do the job." And it was really frank, candid feedback. He said, of course you're ready. Of course you're ready. Stop messing around, woman." So I then looked at a few headships and I had a headship interview down the Bath area, which was an interesting experience. I was the only girl interviewed, and it got talked about in the interview process. And then I got my headship, and I was looking for a different type of leadership opportunity. Like I'd worked in big chains of schools, and I'd worked in a lot of schools where we're doing rapid school improvement and always trying to like sort things out for the year 11s, but then the year 10s need to get sorted out. And this opportunity to be a founding head teacher just really excited me. It was a brand new school. It was literally being built when I got the job. I recruited everyone from scratch, like all the staff, all the governors, all the parents and the carers, all the pupils. And it was just an amazing opportunity, but it was also really, really full on. Like I basically worked by myself for 6 months within the trust office and then recruited my SLT, but they were all in their other jobs. And we're trying to start this, like it was really intense. And I was ahead there for just over 2.5 years, and I lost myself in the Rima, if I'm being really honest. Like it became completely all-consuming and firefighting. It was a really vulnerable community. I had such a small team and there was so much to do. Like startup schools don't have any less work to do than a full school. And we had a lot less people and a lot less budget to do it. So I did feel like we were always, like we had such big ideas and we were so progressive. We were doing amazing things. We got great feedback. But there were lots of things like operationally, logistically, that just became like real tensions. And I think that like I ended up spending most of my time on the phone to the police, the LADO, like doing high safeguarding, which was actually taking me away from some of the things that would have really helped the school move forward. So it was joyous, but also really full on simultaneously.
Yeah. And that resonated with me. And I know that kind of feeling of it being so all-consuming and you spending the time on the things that don't necessarily move the needle and don't necessarily light you up, absolutely have to get done. The amount of times I can remember having a conversation with my husband and he'd go, "Do you have to be doing that? Like, is that the thing?" And I'd go, "Yeah, because it's compliance, it's legal. If I do," and I'd go, "If I don't do this, something bad will happen." Yeah, while because no one else to do it potentially, then you couldn't do the other bit.
I think that's what we both find now, isn't it? And anyone else in our situation, that's the liberation piece about working for yourself, that things are never going to be that stressful again. That I still have responsibility for things and people, but I don't have responsibility for people's lives. And I think I don't quite appreciate it that for 20 years, I was carrying quite a heavy load, which you do as a school leader, as a head teacher. And I took the job really seriously. And I like we all do, like it just became such a massive weight. And it took me a long time to like decompress. But I think I have much more lightness in my life now because I'm not carrying that load all the time.
Yeah, it's such an insane job. I remember having conversations with people as well when we were talking about trying to maybe like implement something new or managing situations maybe around safeguarding, how that works structurally in terms of the school. And if you compared to how many people and the budget you've got available within a school system to get that running and working, compared to maybe another, you know, corporate world, but it's so different, you know, in a corporate company, you might have 5 people running one element, and in school you've got one head teacher pretty much trying to do the job of so many. And you're right, the weight is huge, isn't it? And I there's a lot out there around kind of trauma, and secondary trauma is something I talk to lots of people about, because you're holding so much. Even if you just took the safeguarding element of the job, even if you do have a DSL or someone else to support you, you're holding these people's lives, and the knowledge that gets shared with you on a daily basis is so heavy.
It's so heavy. We talked a lot about compassion fatigue. Like, I had a brilliant team. My SLT in particular were fantastic and really, really equipped, and loads of great ideas and loads of skills. But we all just found it really a lot. And the vulnerability in the student body, the parent body, and the staff body, it was the compassion fatigue. It was the impact of mental health and well-being on the school, really, and on our ability to do our jobs to its fullest.
Yeah. And that's still where we're at, isn't it? We're in a tough place.
I think it's worse, Emma. I think it's worse.
It's getting worse. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, a year ago, I was in it a year and a bit ago, and it was tough. And since then, you know, I speak to so many people who are at that place, and it makes me so sad when I hear people leaving, because I adored the job. It was absolutely so tough, but I adored it. But it became untenable, and that's happening to so many people, isn't it? As you were talking, I was interested to think about who or what, I guess, inspired you along that way. So like you said, you know, there were people pushing you up the ladder, and clearly you're born to lead. So I can totally see why they would. But along the way, are there people who inspired you to take
a really interesting question. So the first person, well, if I think about my first person to really inspire me, was my A-level English lit teacher, Sally. And that's why I did postcolonial literature, and that's why I went to UKC, because it's where she'd gone to uni. So she reignited my passion for my subject, and I've never managed to track her down since. And I'd love to reconnect with her. And then my head of English and my mentor when I was an NQT English teacher, Pam, also just an amazing woman. I was working at the boys' grammar school, and she was so cutting edge. Like, she was so funky and well dressed, and like disrupting things in this quite staid traditional school. So those two were brilliant. And then I had a bit of a lack of role models for quite a considerable amount of time. And that's why I ended up joining Twitter, and that's why I ended up becoming one of the co-founders of Women Ed, because I was looking for female representation. I was looking for visible female role models, and I wasn't necessarily seeing them where I was working. Like, there were other role models, there were male role models, but I didn't want to lead in that particular way. So I joined Twitter, didn't like it, and left it. And then I rejoined about a year and a half later. And I think it's 15 years ago now. And just started connecting with people. And I met people like Jill Berry who have become friends, like people who I was following on socials, who I then met at events. And you go from being sort of like virtual contacts, professional contacts, to personal contacts. And I've been really fortunate, I'm not going to say lucky, really fortunate, because I've spent quite a lot of time investing in intentionally like networking, but I've had people look out for me, and I've in turn looked out for others. So that's what kept me going, really. I've had a lack of role models. I knew what I didn't want to be as a leader, and I was looking for, like, actually, who do I want to be? Like, who do I want to emulate? Like, what bits do I want to, which bits do I want to cherry pick? And one of the people I often talk about, unfortunately passed away this year, but Karen Giles was one of my mentors, one of my coaches. I met her through Women Ed and through the Leading Women's Alliance, but then she was part of my MPQH program, and we became really, really firm friends. And she was someone who, when I was having a really tricky time as a head teacher, I'd ring her, and she'd lend me the wisdom, because she's a bit older than me, of what she would do. So I think it's having that circle of support around you, really.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? I'm a bit interested in when you were talking about what you don't want to be, because you know, a lot of people definitely experience that, and I think can send you in one or two ways. Either you go, I don't want to be that, so I don't want to be a leader, or you go, I don't want to be that, I can do it differently, make space for me as you did, what were the key like characteristics or things that you just went, I'm not doing it that way?
Two people, I'm not going to say names, but two people spoke up for me. One of them, she made it all about her. And I'm a real, like, we, us, our kind of person. And I'm all about us as a team being successful. And I think one of the worst things you could say to me is, like, Hannah makes it all about her, because I really try not to. So I think I learned that quite early on, that this person, it was all about her visibility and her opportunities, and we were like in the shadows. I didn't like that. And then when I then changed schools and had another line manager, he was just Teflon. Like, responsibility is a really important value to me. Like, I'm always punctual, I always meet deadlines, and he was chaos. And he was Teflon, to the point that I'd be teaching a lesson, like teaching my year 11s, and he'd open the door and interrupt my lesson to ask me to do something that he'd been asked by the head to do probably 4 weeks before that, and he'd forgotten, not asked me, and he was being told off for missing a deadline, so he thought he'd interrupt me teaching. And I had to manage up and say, can you pop it in an email to me? Can you forward me the thread? And that made me even angrier, because he was putting his chaos onto me. So I think those two really spring to mind as the leaders I didn't want to be. I want to make it a collegiate camaraderie kind of affair, and I want to reduce wellbeing issues and workload issues by keeping things really organised and really efficient. And anyone who knows me, I'm a massive forward planner. Like, I've got friends who say, what are you doing summer 26, Anne? But like trying to keep myself organised in order to keep others organised, try and reduce the stress. I don't like telling people off for not doing things. I like to help people get things done in advance.
Yeah. That is so important. And what you're talking about there, is trying to put that kind of psychological safety, but the opportunities for others to thrive within it. And if you look at it as like a basic sense of, cortisol levels are going to fly when the leader is flapping around all over the place. But I was chatting to somebody earlier that we don't always make time to think about those they're not little, they become big, but they're little, ways we behave, how we set things up, those kind of the dynamics that are going to make things work or not. People think about leadership being about being the biggest voice in the room and having the direction and having all the knowledge, and it's not. It's about setting up others to be able to succeed and pulling all those strings together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the two things that come up for me there are like the kind of the communication piece. That I was a pretty good communicator as an English teacher, but it was all about communication with others and making sure that what you were saying was being heard and being understood. But also the accountability piece as well. And like, I've done all the different personality profiles, and my personality profile changed quite a lot as a result of me working in a lot of failing schools. But I had to become a systems person. Like, I became the spreadsheet person, the colour-coded tracker person. I became the VP who restructured the whole of the shared drive because it was in a mess. And that's not necessarily who I am, but that helped bring some order to the chaos that was actually creating a lot of stress, which also wasn't helping the communication. So it's, absolutely. It's seeing how you can remove barriers and help people flourish and thrive, really, in their roles.
Yeah. I think that's probably a lot of what you actually are doing now, probably, isn't it? If you summed up some of the work that you do now. I would love to hear a little bit more about that bit when you handed your notice in and you'd made that decision. And for me, it's a journey from where I was at that point, emotionally, physically, career, etc., to, I don't know, I think maybe I expected it to be like, oh, right, I'm out, ta-da, and it takes some time, doesn't it? But like, what was that like for you?
So I resigned end of March. I wanted to get the resignation in before Easter. I wanted to give them extra time to make sure they could replace me. I was going away for my 40th with some of my girlfriends, and I wanted to go away with that kind of like done. In retrospect, I kind of dug a hole which they could then push me into, because they then behind the scenes got lots of things sorted and then announced I was going on gardening leave. So there was no reason to put me on gardening leave. And they then messed up quite a few things with my deputy head becoming the interim head teacher and then bringing in someone to be the executive head teacher. And it was all an absolute mess. And that's what really, like, I was absolutely fine about resigning. But it was how I was treated post-resignation that was problematic. The empowerment piece was the fact that because I'd resigned and ultimately I had the power in my hands, they could have put a gagging order and NDA in. So gardening leave was how they thanked me for all my hard work. And I basically decided to take control of that situation. I wasn't going to sit at home and be sad for the summer term. So I said to my parents, I'm really scared, I just bought a house. Can I borrow some money and go to South America? And I went to South America for 10 weeks. And I just needed like completely to get out of the country. I lived down the road from the school. All my team were very like in contact with me all the time. And I needed to have that absolute like detachment from it all. And I went traveling in South America. That's what I remember from my 40th year. I don't remember resigning from Headship or being put on gardening leave. And I also just loved, it was liberating going traveling with a group of people who weren't teachers, who I didn't tell them I was a head teacher. I didn't tell them I was on gardening leave. I was just Hannah in the UK who works in education. And that was quite sort of like liberating in itself, that no one asked me, was I going to be a head teacher? So it was an interesting period. I had to basically stay within my contract until August 31st. And then come September the 1st, I spoke quite openly about the experience of being put on gardening leave and the impact it had on me, because so many people can't talk about it. And I think one of our problems in our sector right now is a lot of people are being maltreated by their employers, but they get handcuffed and can't talk about it. And I also had the privilege of, I was single, no children, I could afford my mortgage. I didn't worry about leaving my job. I knew I'd get another job. But if I'd had dependents, if I'd been in a different situation financially, I wouldn't have been able to resign and for that to happen. So I've kind of talked about it. I've had lots of people contact me to share their experiences. And I don't think people realise how rife it is or how many people are being impacted by it. And I did a post, well, I've been to a few events in the summer term and I had so many disclosures from people, mainly people of colour in my network. So I did a post on LinkedIn at the end of the summer to say, I know so many people who are going to be out of work but can't say they're out of work and they're looking for jobs. Can you let me know if there are any leadership vacancies from deputy headship to headship in your network? And I got another treadload of disclosures. So it is dream. I don't know how we fix that problem. That's what Sue Cowley and I were talking about on Blue Sky this week. I don't know how we really shine a light on the fact that so many people are being chucked out of the system right now, and the good eggs sometimes are the ones being pushed out.
Yeah, and I probably heard a snippet of what you've heard, but I would say, hearing loads of stories at all levels of leadership and teaching, probably, of people who find themselves in those sorts of situations. And what, I guess that is the question, isn't it? How can we?
There needs to be a bit of an expose.
People say to you, you're brave for talking about it, and that's you, and that's who you are, and you know that by doing that, it's valuable for you to get that out there, to share your side of it, but also it's so empowering for other people to hear that. Because I think when you're in anything that is challenging, you just feel like you're all alone sometimes, don't you? You know? And then when you put something out there, like I've written a blog about why I left, and people just go, oh my gosh, I feel the same. I feel not alone. I also feel really sad that there's so many people feeling as we did and do in the system, because there is so many elements of it that just are not set up to help leaders to thrive. And the knock-on of that is that our teachers aren't thriving and our young people aren't thriving, because it's all a bit mushed.
Well, no, it is. And like, I come back from some events and I've had a great day, but I come home feeling quite heavy. And I've coached so many school leaders. When I close my laptop on a Friday afternoon, I've just coached 5 people. I'm like, it's a bit depressing. Like, actually, I've heard from 14 school leaders this month, and they're all like carrying a lot, and it's all unsustainable, and they all look like full valued or looked after. Like, there's definitely a piece to really unlock there. And you're right about your blog. Like, when I have spoken very rawly and very vulnerably and very openly about some of the things that happened on my journey, they are always the blogs and the talks that I get the most traction from. I do think we need to do more of that, sharing the kind of the warts and all and the trials and tribulations. That to me is the kind of the learning piece of good leaders. I don't want to go to a talk and listen to someone who's got to the top and just telling me how good they are and how easy it is, or like forgetting all the kind of the things that got them there. I think we need to share more of the struggle personally.
And that's what's important, I guess, isn't it? So tell us more about what you're doing now and what that looks like and how you're supporting schools, because you are always incredibly busy and I'm always in awe of the things that you get up to.
Well, I'm busy, but lots of these things feed in and out of each other. So what am I currently up to? So with diverse educators, we're now a team of 14. And everyone's a freelancer and everyone's got their own kind of like thing going on, but I curate quite a lot of work and bring them in for programs and series and events. So I'd say probably like 60 to 70% of my time is working on diverse educators, doing DEIB training for schools, colleges and trusts in the UK, but also overseas, and sometimes out of the education sector as well. I've done some training this morning for the Royal College of Nursing, for example, so it's always interesting to talk to other sectors. And then I spend a lot of time coaching. So I'm a qualified executive coach. I coach a lot of school leaders. I've also got clients from non-education who I really enjoy coaching as well. And then I run leadership training. And all those three things might sound quite disparate, but actually they all feed into and out of each other. Like it's all about the culture of our workplace, how inclusive we are, how we're leading, how to improve communication. So yeah, I love my job. It's great. It's a job. It doesn't feel like a job most of the time, to be honest.
Do you feel like you're doing the best bits of school leadership, but in a way that aligns with your values and you can make a difference to more people?
Yeah, like going back to like the busyness and the stressfulness and the heaviness of being ahead, like there was probably 10% of the job I really enjoyed, and that is now my 90%. And I think I found a way to like do what I love and do what I'm good at more and get paid for it. Like the whole Ikigai piece, like I've basically found a way to make what was my passion project and what I used to do as a volunteer evenings and weekends into my day job. And it wasn't the intention. It's not why I co-founded Women Egg 10 years ago. But it's what I'm good at and it's what I enjoy and it's what people need right now. But it's just there's a lot of synergy there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking, I was just thinking that the job of the head is, I guess, almost impossible sometimes, because you are expected to be good and effective at potentially so many different things, and that's maybe just not. Maybe that's why it's untenable, because actually I think, well, do you know what, I'm a ideas person, get things started, like consistency, no thanks, I'm bored by that. So policy, no, don't want to do it. You know, there was things that in my job description were there and I thought I don't want to do them, and maybe like the idea of a co-head has always really appealed to me, and how we can better have less hierarchical structures and teams of people that can actually run. It's like a octopus with multiple arms, isn't it? A school. Is it appropriate that one person has to hold all of that?
It's an interesting question. There's a great book called Spike by a guy called Rene Carroll, who is corporate, and it's all about like, are we all aiming to be average at everything or really good at a few things? And like he gives us this example of like, why would you put your best salesperson on rotation into an office where they talk to people when they are your best salesperson? Your best salesperson should be doing sales all the time. And I do think there's a tendency sometimes in schools to try and round everyone out and get everyone being good at everything. And I was really like, I had a brilliant team as a head. I had a brilliant school business manager. I had a brilliant site manager, a brilliant KP manager. They were the bits I didn't have the skill set to do. And I had a really strong team. So actually, when I started my own business, I think a lot of people who have their own small companies try to do everything. I can't believe how my friends try to do their books. I'm not an accountant. Why would I do my books? Why would I do my VAT return? Don't pay someone to do that. I outsource what I can outsource so that I can spend my time doing what I'm good at, where I can earn my money, and actually pay people to do the website, pay people to do my accounts. So I think we need to almost take stock sometimes of what should we be spending our time and energy on, and who could be supporting us elsewhere.
Do you think women are worse at that than men? Like that sense of I've got to hold it all together because that's, like I've got to be great in my career, I've got to be a fantastic partner or mum, or have a social life. Like, I don't know.
Probably. I think men are better at compartmentalizing and perhaps like drawing boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think I've always been quite good at that. I get teased by most of my friends and family about how strong my boundaries are, because my boundaries weren't strong when I was ahead, and when I left Headship, I was like, my boundaries are going to look after me now. Yeah. So they're quite rigid in some ways because I need them to be. I think it's an interesting one, whether it's gendered or not. I think it's to do with upbringing. I think it's to do with the kind of schools we've perhaps worked in. I've worked for like real like no nonsense head teachers who just wanted us to focus on core business and like reduce all the fluff and all the noise. So I think I've taken that with me.
Yeah, it's helpful if you can.
Mm.
I'm a bit of a get distracted. I'm like, oh, shiny thing. Off I go. My
That
friends
guy.
want to, yeah, they're like, my husband said to me the other day, he's like, you need a set of blinkers. So you just like, just do one thing. So I get excited by too many different things. All right, you mentioned boundaries, and before we started recording, we were talking about X.
Yes.
And then you mentioned Twitter and being on that, and kind of how great a networking platform that was, and and a space, I guess, for educators. Tell us a bit more about where you're at with that, because it's a bit of a topical thing.
Yeah, it's really topical, isn't it? So I joined X. My career benefited from being on X. I met brilliant people. I networked. I went to events. I blogged. I got invitations to things like through my big network on there. I actually staffed 2 schools through my network, through X and LinkedIn, and saved hundreds of thousands of pounds. Like, it's really brought me lots of opportunities. But in the last few years, since it's been sold to Mr. Musk, like, it's just not a safe place to be. And I've watched it deteriorate rapidly, and I've seen the increase in hate and prejudice and discrimination. And I've pulled back quite a lot. But with what happened this summer, I made a decision I was coming off of it. And a lot of my colleagues in the DEI world have come off of it. And like, it was the right thing to do for my network and for my job and for my values. But I did have a bit of a wobble, like, gosh, I've got 45,000 followers on there. Like, will they still know where to find me? Am I going to like now not get work and not get paid? And that's not the be all and end all. It's people's safety that's really, really important. But I did have to have quite a lot of a self-talk about it all. And I've brought it up in most of my training sessions for the last 4 weeks about, like, I'm here to talk about DEIB, and for me, from a values point of view, from a values leadership point of view, we need to think about, are we aligned to platforms and spaces? Like, we don't shop in certain shops, we don't go to certain events. Should we be on that platform? Lots of people have left it individually. But my question then is, but has your school got an account still? And has your trust got an account still? Like, are we actually perpetuating the problem by still being there? A lot of people have jumped to Blue Sky and still got an X account. Well, if you're going to leave X because it's not okay, you need to delete your account and find somewhere else to exist. So I think it's an interesting topic at the moment, that I think people found their belonging there and worry about dislocating themselves and disconnecting themselves and starting over. And it takes a lot of time and energy to network. So now I'm Blue Sky, and like, I'm kind of like just like a little fly, no one knows who I am, but I'm hoping that like my network will grow there now as well.
Yeah. Starting afresh and starting anew. I think in the time that I've followed you along, been a bit of a fan, what shines out is your values and how important those are. And you were such a strong, like, an inspiration to me, because I'm like, right, Hannah would do this, or Hannah would do it that way. And that's so important, and the support that you give to people at like all stages in their journey, because you're working with schools, you're working with educators, working with leaders, but you also support those who are in the, like me, who've stepped out of it and stepping into the business world as well, because it's a scary place to be when you're starting afresh and you've had those experiences that are some positive but some negativity, and you're always someone that elevates the voices of others. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate that. And it is that, isn't it? If a couple of people listening do a check-in and think, actually, should I still be there and join another platform? It's that, like, the more of us who vote with our feet, actually it will have to be addressed. And the first thing he did was sack his whole EDI team. Like, that was the message when he took over Twitter and it became X. Like, going from a blue bird to a black X, we should have all seen this coming, really. So Blue Sky is a lovely space. If you were on Twitter 10 years ago, it's like Twitter in the old days. Everyone's lovely, everyone's friendly. And if not LinkedIn, like, I've been on LinkedIn for about 10 years as well. My biggest network's now on LinkedIn. And I think LinkedIn's fab for like professional networking, if you're trying to find certain people in a certain role or region or employer, whereas Blue Sky's a bit more lighthearted and you can be a bit more sort of like off duty.
Oh, perfect. I mean, I think I might have an account, but it's just another thing to do.
I know.
Love LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm a real Instagrammer. I love a bit of that. Oh, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I was going to say, Instagram for me is like my holiday snaps. I haven't veered to like professional Instagram. That's one of my boundaries. It's just me and my holidays. No, thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, it's been fab. When I post it, we'll put links to all of the amazing things you do to get out there. Thank you so much, Hannah.
My pleasure. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you so much for listening to the Stories of School Leadership podcast. We'd love to know what inspired you in this episode, so do get in touch and tell us your thoughts. And please share this with friends and colleagues. If you have time, a review would mean so much. It really helps us to reach more people. If you'd like to connect with me to follow my journey or access some support, maybe supervision, coaching or early years consultancy, you can find me at Stories of School Leadership on Instagram. I'm Emma Lurie on LinkedIn, or my website is emmalurie.co.uk. I hope you have a great day whatever you're getting up to next, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you.